In this video today, I want to talk about the role and the coronation robes of one person involved in the coronation, someone who holds an ancient office, the Lord Mayor of London. Now, if you look at the photographs of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II and of her father George VI, you can see the Lord Mayor of London in his colourful and distinctive robes standing in a very prominent position on the south side of the sacrarium, close to St Edward's chair, standing between two other key figures, the Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod and Garter, Principal King of Arms, the Chief of the Heralds. In this video, I will look at the historical reasons why the Lord Mayor of London has such a prominent position at the coronation, and also the significance of the wonderful robes he is wearing, which are really very special indeed. At this point, I just want to express my thanks for all of your kind support. I have been really overwhelmed with the response to my little channel. I can't believe how much it has grown over the last month or so. Many thanks for all your subscriptions and thanks for your comments. There are many more videos to come and I'm aiming to release 2 a week going forward. So who then is the Lord Mayor of London, and why does he stand in such a prominent position at the coronation? Now, just to avoid confusion, in this video I am not talking about the elected Mayor of London, an office currently held by Sadiq Khan. This is a completely new role and was only invented in the year 2000. The position of Lord Mayor of London is an ancient office, and the Lord Mayor, along with the Corporation of London, of which he is the head, have jurisdiction only over the City of London, which covers the area occupied by the medieval city prior to the city's expansion from the late 17th century onwards. The medieval City of London was an area of about a square mile. It had defensive walls around it, and it was once crammed with houses, shops and people. But since London expanded outwards after the Industrial Revolution, very few people now live in that ancient city, and it has become instead the financial heart of the capital. The first mayor of the City of London, not yet a Lord Mayor, was appointed by King Richard I in 1189. In 1215, his brother King John gave the citizens of London the right to manage their own affairs and to elect their own mayor from among the aldermen, the senior citizens of the city. In 1354, King Edward III granted the title of Lord Mayor to the office, which gave the city even more independence from Crown authority. As the Middle Ages progressed and as the City of London grew more wealthy, the role of the Lord Mayor of London became increasingly important politically. From 1399 and the fall of King Richard II, who was a rather autocratic sovereign, English kings have to a certain degree ruled through the consent of their subjects. And if a king of England in the late medieval period was to establish a successful rule, the support of the Lord Mayor, the commonalty, the Common Council of Aldermen, and the citizens of the City of London was absolutely imperative. When there was a disruptive change of regime, as there was in 1399 and on a number of occasions during the 15th and 16th century, the support of the Lord Mayor of London and the Corporation of London was paramount. When Edward IV won the Battle of Towton in 1461 and effectively deposed King Henry VI, the first thing he did was to enter London to gain the support of the Lord Mayor and citizens, and that secured his throne. Did you just hear the growl then? That was my dog growling at the postman who's just put something in the letterbox. When Edward IV was temporarily deposed in 1471, he regains the throne again by entering London unopposed and securing its support. When Edward dies in 1483 and his brother Richard Duke of Gloucester seizes the throne from his nephew Edward V, it is the Lord Mayor of London, Edmund Shah, who is instrumental in galvanising support for Richard. There are many other examples where the support of the Lord Mayor and citizens has been crucial to stabilise royal rule. Now, you may remember only a few short weeks ago the Accession Council in St James's Palace to confirm the accession of King Charles III to the throne. The Accession Council is made up not only of the Privy Council, but also includes the Lord Mayor and the Sheriff of London. The presence of the Lord Mayor and Sheriff has nothing to do with their present rather limited authority, but due to their role as an important medieval power broker. When you understand the previous power and prestige of the office of Lord Mayor, it's not really a surprise that the Mayor takes a prominent place in the coronation. Now, to understand why the Lord Mayor of London stands between Garter King of Arms and Black Rod at the coronation, we need to look in some detail at coronations from past history. Since the reign of William IV, the coronation has begun with a carriage procession from the sovereign's principal residence, either St James's Palace or more recently Buckingham Palace. And that carriage procession goes to the west door of Westminster Abbey, and then there's a procession up the aisle of the Abbey to the Sacrarium, where St Edward's chair is placed. From the reign of King James II up to the coronation of William IV, there was no carriage procession, and the King and or Queen had a procession on foot from Westminster Hall. But prior to the reign of James II, there was a much longer coronation procession, in which the Lord Mayor of London played a prominent role. From the reign of King Richard II, it had become the tradition for the King to leave his palace of Westminster outside the City of London and go to the Tower of London on the other side of the City of London for an all-night vigil. On reaching the Temple Bar, which is the western entrance into the City of London from Westminster and the place where the Mayor's jurisdiction begins, the King was met by the Lord Mayor and aldermen and was then escorted to the Tower by them for the King's protection. The following day, the King on horseback left the Tower and processed through the crowds thronging the streets of the ancient city to Westminster Abbey. And the Lord Mayor would accompany the King again through his jurisdiction. The Lord Mayor's presence in the procession demonstrating to the assembled citizens that he supported the new King's regime. He rode in procession with the Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod and Garter King of Arms, directly in front of the great officers of state. Now you can see the three of them in this engraving of the coronation procession of King Charles II, the last of these horseback processions from the Tower of London to Westminster to take place. When the shorter walking procession was introduced by King James II, it simply followed the pattern of the old, and the Lord Mayor took his place in that new procession, but on foot, even though the procession was now well outside his jurisdiction. The procession in the Abbey before the coronation, that has been the norm since 1831, is just a reduced version of those older processions, and so, as before, the Lord Mayor takes his place as he has done for centuries before. Despite the reality now that the Lord Mayor of London has no real role in the coronation or in the procession, and he is no longer such an important power broker. Since at least the coronation of George IV in 1821, the Lord Mayor of London has worn a very distinctive and unique set of coronation robes that reflect his unique political status in England. The robe is made of dark red silk velvet, though I have seen it suggested that it is superfine wool, it may be, and it has a train at the back. On the front it is decorated with 4 bands of ermine and gold lace. Interestingly, the 4 bands of ermine and lace reflect almost the parliamentary robes of a duke, which have a similar arrangement on them. Of course, you don't see those ducal robes at the coronation. On the shoulders of the Lord Mayor's robes are white silk satin ribbons, which are used to attach the Lord Mayor of London's collar, which is worn on all major civic occasions by the Mayor. The present collar has been worn continuously since 1545, when it was bequeathed to the Lord Mayors in perpetuity by Sir John Allen, a former mayor, who wished it to be worn, as he stated in his will, yearly at and upon principal and festival days. The collar is what is called a collar of S's. In other words, it is a series of S-shaped components. Collars of this sort are called livery collars and were given to prominent servants of great men in the late medieval period. The collar of S's began as a livery collar of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, one of the sons of King Edward III, and then it was passed down to his descendants, the Royal House of Lancaster, in the 15th century. Nobody really quite knows what the S means. It has been suggested that it represents the motto of John of Gaunt's son, King Henry IV, which was Sovereign. Maybe so. It will remain a point of debate. At the end of the Wars of the Roses, the collar of S's was revived by the Tudors, who saw themselves as the lineal descendants of the House of Lancaster, as a sign of royal service and allegiance to the crown. And great officers of state wore them in the reign of King Henry VIII. This particular collar, worn by the Lord Mayor, was altered in 1567, and between the gold S's were placed enamelled Tudor roses, red and white roses, another nod to the City of London's loyalty to the Tudor regime, a city that was becoming increasingly prosperous in Queen Elizabeth I's reign. But the most impressive part of the Lord Mayor's coronation ensemble is the so-called crystal sceptre, which the Lord Mayors have carried in the coronation procession, at least since the 17th century when we have the first visual evidence, and they hold for the duration of the coronation ceremony. It is called the crystal sceptre now, but that term is a bit of a misnomer. It is rather a very lavish and elaborate form of civic mace. Now, maces are used a lot at the coronation, and I will do a video specifically on their use and their meaning. But in brief, for the moment, maces were originally weapons carried by royal bodyguards, but in the later Middle Ages, and it's not that much of a leap to see why, they came to represent the authority of the sovereign and started being given out and used more widely. They are given, for example, to the Houses of Parliament, to the Commons and the Lords in Parliament assembled, to represent the sovereign's sanction of their proceedings, and neither house in Parliament can sit without a royal mace being present. They were also given to town and city corporations similarly, or they were made by them, to represent the king's authority in those places and to sanction their government. By the later Middle Ages, the head of the mace, which was originally the bit you battered somebody with, was usually topped with a crown, and on either the end or on the sides of the head, it was decorated with the royal arms. Now, the Corporation of London has a series of maces that are carried before the Lord Mayor and express his authority. And the crystal sceptre is simply a more portable version of that symbol of authority. It represents the Lord Mayor's office and the authority of the Corporation of London and their governance under the Crown. Now, its role is made clear when there is a transition every year between one Lord Mayor and the next. In a ceremony which is called the Silent Ceremony, which takes place in London's Guildhall each November, the day before the Lord Mayor's show, the sceptre is touched by the outgoing and the new Lord Mayor to symbolise the transfer of authority from one to the other. The crystal sceptre is a really rather splendid example of the medieval goldsmith's craft, as befits the medieval financial and commercial centre of England. The shaft of the sceptre is made of rock crystal. The knop, which is the knobbly bit in the middle of the shaft, is of the same. The shaft is fluted and it's enriched with gold wire, and there are strings of pearls on gold wire soldered to it. The head of the sceptre, the mace, which is formed into a delicate crown, is studded with 3 cabochon sapphires and 3 of what, when the sceptre was made, would have been termed balas rubies, spinels, between more pearls. At the end of the sceptre, illuminated on parchment and set under a further rock crystal, is a colourful representation of the royal arms. Dr. Michael Hall, in his recent article on the sceptre, there is a link to it in the description below, connects this royal arms to an identically painted royal arms on a manuscript that dates from between 1430 and 1440 and is now in the British Library. That gives a rough date for the sceptre as creation in the second quarter of the 15th century. There are a number of similar late medieval and Tudor maces still in existence, but none are quite as fancy as this. The town of Hedon in the East Riding of Yorkshire has a mace of silver with an iron core, while Stratford-on-Avon in Warwickshire has a silver mace belonging to the corporation, which was made for the Guild of Corpus Christi at the beginning of the 16th century. It's an astonishing thought, but William Shakespeare's father was a bailiff of the Guild of Corpus Christi, and Shakespeare would have seen this mace either carried by his father or before his father in civic processions. The head of this mace is very similar in form to the crystal sceptre, topped with a crown and with the royal arms at the end. Now, it has been suggested that the crystal sceptre was given to the City of London in the early 15th century by King Henry V in thanksgiving for the loan of 10,000 marks used in his Agincourt campaign. The date of the piece tantalisingly suggests this might be true, but sadly there is no documentary evidence at all that this is the case. It has been suggested too that the sceptre was made in Paris, but again, this is without foundation. That's a conclusion based on the assumption that London goldsmiths were incapable of producing such an exquisite work of art. London was a great centre of the goldsmith's craft in the late Middle Ages, and it was quite capable of producing work of this quality. Thanks very much for watching.